Hello and welcome. This is Vicki and I'm here today to go over Lesson 3 Working with Selections in Photoshop CC 2019 Classroom in a Book. If you have the book, you can follow along with me. I've also uploaded some of the start files for this lesson and Lesson 5, which will be recorded separately in our Canvas course shell in this week's module under the associated content pages, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. People may be joining us, but we'll just continue on through this lesson and then I'll take questions if there are any. I want to talk just a little bit about selecting and selection tools. When you go to make changes to an area within an image in Photoshop, you're going to do a two-step process. You first use one of the selection tools to select part of an image that you want to change, and then you use another tool, filter, or some other feature to make changes. You can make selections based on size, shape, and color. When a selection is active, changes that you make apply only to the selected area, and other areas are unaffected. Students often ask me, what is the best selection tool? And that varies. It depends on the characteristics of the area that you're trying to select, such as shape or color. And you might want to remember that there are 4 primary types of selections. There's a geometric selection, which includes the marquee tools up here, second from the top. So if you click on that little downward facing arrow, you'll see there's a number of different geometric selections tools. You can make freehand selections with the lasso tools, and those are the third from the top. And then you can make edge-based selections down here using the quick selection tool, which paints a selection by automatically finding and following defined edges in the image. And then you can choose the magic wand tool to make color-based selections. And this would select parts of an image based on the similarity in pixel color. So here we have our image that we're going to create. I've opened it by going up to File, Open, and then I navigated to where I keep my lesson files. Remember, you can reset the default preferences if you like to make everything go back to the way it was when you first opened up Photoshop and have it match the book exactly. Another thing you can do is you can reset your workspace. So if we are working in Essentials, which is our default, you can go up to Window, Workspace, and reset Essentials. And that will put everything back into its place the way it was when you first opened Photoshop with the Essentials workspace. The next file that I'm going to go ahead and close the end file, and I want to open the start file. Here's all my components that I'm going to use as I practice my selections. First thing I'm going to do is save as, so that I can save a copy of this and not lose my original in case I want to go back to it, try again, or anything else. So I'll go ahead and save it in the Lesson 3 folder. Actually, I'm going to save it to my desktop. And that way, it's easier for me to delete when I'm finished with it. The quick selection tool is one of the easiest ways to make a selection. You just paint over an area of an image and the tool automatically finds the edges. A good potential selection here is the sand dollar. It has clearly defined edges, so that makes it a pretty good candidate for the quick selection tool. We want to select just the sand dollar and not the background. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to the sand dollar. I want to be able to see that pretty well. I want to make sure you guys can see it. Put it right in the middle of the screen. Then I will choose my quick selection tool, and up in the option bar, I want to make sure that Auto Enhance is selected. When this is selected, the quick selection tool will create better quality selections with edges that are true to the object. It's a little bit slower than when you have it unchecked, but the results are better. I'm going to click on an area inside the sand dollar, but near the edge, and just keep on. Oops, you know what? I have mine set to remove, so let's do that again. I'll just paint just a tiny little bit, and the quick selection tool finds the full edge automatically. You can see the marching ants there. Now I'm going to leave it active and move on to the next exercise. If you want to move a selected area to another part of the composition, you use the Move tool. This Move tool is up here at the top of your toolbar. This image that we're working with only has one layer, the background layer. So when I move this selection, the pixels I move are going to replace the pixels beneath them. So I'll zoom out so that I can see the picture again. We're going to place this right up there in A, so I just want to make it, leave it a little bit big so you can see it. Now I'm going to select the Zoom tool. I can see both the area in which I'm going to place the sand dollar and the sand dollar. Sand dollar still selected. Now I can drag it up to the upper edge, upper left area of this frame, and I'm going to position it over the silhouette. I want to leave the lower left silhouette showing as a shadow. So I'm going to try to match it up as closely as possible to what I see in the book. So there's not a whole lot of shadow. There's a little bit of edge of that background showing here on the right. So when I let go of my mouse, it drops it into that area. And if I deselect by either using my keyboard shortcuts or going up to select, deselect, then the marching ants disappear and the sand dollar is in its new home. You'll see that it has essentially been cut out of this area down below. I will save my work and move on. It's not easy to lose a selection, but if you want to deselect an area, you can go up as we did to select and press deselect, or you can use the keyboard shortcuts, or you can click outside the selection with any selection tool. When you have something selected, you can move it, reposition them, duplicate them. We're going to learn a couple of ways now in which we can manipulate selections. Excuse me if you can hear the book. I'm trying to stay as close to that as possible for you. First thing we're going to do is reposition a selection marquee while we create it. So selecting ovals and circles can be tricky. It's not always obvious where you should start dragging, so sometimes the selection will be off center or the ratio of width to height won't match what you need. So in this next exercise, you're going to learn techniques for managing those problems, including 2 important keyboard mouse combinations that will make your Photoshop work easier. As you do this, try to pay attention to the directions about keeping the mouse button or specific keys pressed. If you accidentally release the mouse at the wrong time, just start the exercise again from the beginning. Select the Zoom tool and click on the plate of shells down at the bottom left. You want to zoom in to at least 100%. and 200% if it still fits on your screen. And here it does easily. I'm going to click underneath the rectangular marquee tool and choose the elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to move the pointer over the plate of shells and drag diagonally across the oval plate to create a selection, but not release the mouse. Don't worry if things don't match the shape of this plate yet. Just start your selection, drag across. Don't let go of the mouse. If you do let go of the mouse, just go ahead and draw the selection again. Still holding down the mouse button, press the space bar and continue to drag the selection. Drag the mouse. Instead of resizing, you're moving it. So position it so that it is aligned with the plate again. Release the space bar, but not the mouse. Continue to drag. If you need to, you can press the space bar again, kind of drag it around. We're trying to match this as closely as possible. Okay, we're getting pretty good here. And when I feel like I've got a pretty good selection inside the selection border, I'm going to go ahead and release the mouse button. Now you see the marching ants. I'll go up to View, Fit on Screen, or Command or Control 0, and leave it active so that I can move on to the next step. Now I want to use a keyboard shortcut to move these selected pixels onto the shadow box. And the shortcut temporarily switches the active tool, so our marquee tool, to the move tool, so you don't have to go up and manually select it. With the elliptical marquee tool still selected in the Tools panel, press Control on Windows or Command on Mac and move the pointer within the selection. You'll see that my cursor now has a pair of scissors, and that indicates that the selection is going to be cut from the current location. I continue to hold down Command or Control, and now I can drag this plate of shells into its area, labeled B, on our frame. Again, I want a little bit of that shadow showing. And just let go of the command and let go of your mouse, but don't deselect yet. We're going to nudge this into place using the arrow keys. Whenever you have a selection tool active in the Tools panel, using your arrow keys on your keyboard will nudge the selection border. So if I moved it right now, it would just move the border of my selection. When the Move key tool is active, the arrow keys will move both the selection border and its contents. So we're going to use the arrow keys to nudge this plate of shell. Make sure that it's still selected, and then go ahead and hit your up arrow a few times to move it up. And if you feel like it needs to go a little bit to the right or left, go ahead and use those arrows to move it a little bit more. And you can experiment a little bit to watch it move. It's moving 1 pixel at a time right now. If we hold down the Shift key and hit an arrow, up or down, it moves it 10 pixels. I'm going to go back up and just place it. I'm going to nudge it around until it looks good to me, and I've got a little bit of shadow on the lower left. If the border gets distracting as you're making these adjustments, you can hide the edges of a selection temporarily without actually deselecting. And then you can display the selection border again once you've completed the adjustments. So I'll show you how that works. You go up to View, and you go down to Show, and a little menu pops up, and I can uncheck selection edges, and you can see that it disappears so that I can see my plate of shells a little bit more without being distracted by the edges. Then I'll go back up to View, I'll go to Show, and I'll recheck selection edges to see the selection border again. Now I'm just going to go ahead. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to deselect and save my work. I want to take just a minute to welcome whoever joined us, and I'm going to keep moving ahead, but I'll make some time for questions at the end. We're working on Lesson 3 selections. The next tool we're going to work on is the Magic Wand tool. And the Magic Wand tool is hidden underneath the Quick Selection tool. And what it does is it selects all the pixels of a particular color or color range. It's really useful for selecting an area of similar colors surrounded by areas of very different colors. And then, as with all the other selection tools, after you make the initial selection, you can add or subtract to your selection. What I want to do here is go ahead and we're going to select this piece of coral down here. So I'm going to zoom in on that piece of coral and move it up so that you can see it a little bit better. There we go. And then select the Magic Wand tool, and you'll see again that the option bar changes to everything that has to do with the Magic Wand tool. The tolerance option sets the sensitivity of the Magic Wand tool, and this limits or extends the range of pixel similarity. The default for this is 32, and this selects the color that you click on plus 32 lighter and 32 darker tones of that color. So when you use this tool, you may have to adjust that tolerance up or down depending on the color ranges and other variations in your image. So it's not, there's no recipe for that. If a multicolored area that you want to select, like this, is set against a background of a different color, sometimes it can be easier to select the background and then inverse your selection. So we're going to use the rectangular marquee tool. We're going to select a large area, and then we're going to use the Magic Wand tool to subtract the background from the selection. So the first thing we'll do is go back up here and choose our rectangular marquee tool and drag a selection around the piece of coral. You want to make sure you include all of it and that there is a margin of white all the way around the edges of the coral and the edge of the marquee. So at this point, you have selected both the piece of coral and the white background. Now we want to subtract the white area. So we'll go ahead and choose the Magic Wand tool, make sure the tolerance level is 32, and instead you'll see all these little icons up here. This is making a new selection, this is adding to a selection, this is subtracting from a selection. This is what we want here. So we're going to choose Subtract From, and now a minus sign appears in the cursor when I hover over that area. And anything that I select now is going to be subtracted from that first selection I made with the rectangular marquee tool. I'll go ahead and click in the background area, and you'll see that the marching ants have moved to all the edges of the coral, and now only the coral is selected. Now I'll select the Move tool, and I'm going to drag this up to the shadow box, but first I'll go ahead and fit this on the screen. Select the Move tool and drag it up to the area C. Whoops, didn't move. There we go. Again, I can use all the things that we already used. I can position it kind of by eyeballing it. I could let go with my mouse and use the arrow keys to put it just where I want. And when I finally am happy with where it's placed, I'll deselect it. Of course, I went to a lot of work just now, so I want to save that. And I've gone up to File, Save. All right, we're going to move on now to some of the freehand tools, the lasso tools. There's 3 of them. Oops, where'd they go? Up here, third from the top. There's the lasso, the polygonal lasso, and the magnetic lasso. So the lasso tool, you can make selections that require freehand and straight lines. And you just use keyboard shortcuts, which we're going to go over, to move back and forth between the lasso tool, which is strictly freehand, and the polygonal lasso tool, which selects, makes straight edges, straight lines. Don't worry if this takes you a little while. Take some practice. It takes doing it a few times to get the keyboard shortcuts, and so just, do your best and do it a second time if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and do what we've been doing, which is zoom into the muscle. I'll move it up here so that it's in the center of the screen. And I'm going to select just the regular lasso tool, the one that's on the top of our little menu. And it is a freehand selection tool. I'll say that if you're using a trackpad, this can be challenging to use some of these freehand tools. If you're using a mouse, it's a little bit easier. But the very easiest, if you were to do a lot of this kind of thing, would be to have a stylus and a tablet, because that mimics the natural position of, say, having a pen or a pencil in your hand. If you did a lot of this using your mouse, you probably would get pretty fatigued. But for this quick, in this semester, you don't have to go run and buy a tablet by any means. Start at the lower left section of the muscle. We're going to drag around the rounded edge, tracing it as accurately as we can. And you always want to go slightly inside. So I'm going to go ahead and move around here. And when I get around the rounded section, I'm not going to let go. I'm just going to keep my mouse depressed. And when I reach kind of a straight edge, like right here, I'll go ahead and press either the Alt or the Option key. And then I'm going to release the mouse button so that the lasso pointer changes to the polygonal lasso shape. Don't release the Alt or Option button though. Now I can go ahead and click around here some of these straight areas, following the contours of the muscle, holding down the Alt or Option key until I get to another rounded area where I want to do something that's freehand. Actually, I think it has us going all the way down. I'm just going to, even though this is a little bit rounded, I'm just going to keep going down to the tip. I'm just clicking, holding down the Alt key and going down here to the very tip. And so when I get to the tip, I'm going to hold down the mouse key, and now I'm going to release that Alt or Option key. And now we're back to just the lasso tool. So I can drag my mouse around here, freehand. Now I have another straight area. So I can, again, Alt or Option, let go of the mouse, and just click along these straight areas. So like I said, this takes a little bit of practice. And when you get to the very end, you just want to make sure that you complete your selection. I'm going to go ahead and press with my mouse, let go of the alter option, and make sure that yep. And then if I see the marching ants all the way around, that means I did complete my selection, and now I have the muscle totally selected. I'm going to fit this back on screen, because what we're going to do is move it and rotate it. So I'll go to Command or Control 0, which is the shortcut for fit on screen. Now I'm going to press Control or Command on Windows or Command on Mac. Remember that temporarily changes the selection tool to the move tool. And I'll drag this up to the area labeled D. As you can see, it needs to be rotated. So I'll go up to my Edit menu. I'll go to Transform, and I'll rotate. Now you can see that the muscle and the selection marquee are in a bounding box. And if I hover my mouse over the corner, I have a curved two-headed arrow. I'm going to drag and rotate this muscle 90 degrees. I think I have some questions, so I'm going to pause here. I just want to get through this one exercise, and then I'll check out the possible questions. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'll press Enter or Return to commit those changes. And then if I need to, I can select the Move tool and again, kind of nudge this into position. When I'm happy with that, I'll deselect and save my work. Now I'm going to pause. I'm going to actually go ahead and pause my recording and check for questions. All right, so there's one other tool in the lasso area, and that's the magnetic lasso tool. Now we're going to use this to make a selection. And this will allow you to make freehand selections of areas that have high contrast edges. So when we draw with the magnetic lasso tool, and it is one of my favorites, the selection border kind of snaps to the edge. You have to have good contrast. So as long as you have that, you can use the magnetic lasso tool really effectively. I'm going to zoom in to the Nautilus shell. I'll select my space bar so I can move that up into the middle of the screen so it's a little more visible. And choose the magnetic lasso, which is at the bottom of that little menu in your toolbar. Now I'm going to click once along the left edge of the Nautilus, and I'm going to move it along the edge just to trace it. You can see that just kind of snaps along there, finding the edge. I'm just going to continue all the way around. You can go kind of quickly. And I just want to make sure that I touch that, the place where I started, so that I complete that entire path. And you can see the marching ants. Now you can double click the hand tool, which is over here. That's another way to fit everything on screen. So now you know 3 ways to fit things on screen: the keyboard shortcut, double clicking the hand tool, or going up to the view menu and going to fit on screen. My Nautilus is still selected. I'll choose the Move tool, and I'll drag this up to the area labeled E. And again, I want that little bit of a shadow showing underneath. I'll position it, deselect it, and then save my work. So great, we're moving right along here. We've got just one more thing to select and move, and that is the little screw down here, the brass screw down here on the right. So sometimes it's easier to make an elliptical or rectangular selection by drawing from the object's center point. So earlier I showed you how you could use the space bar to adjust an elliptical marquee when we did that little plate of shells. But now we're going to do something a little bit different with the screw. So I'll zoom in here so that you can see this really clearly. I'll reposition it by using the space bar, which temporarily turns into the hand tool, which will move the image around in my window. You want to be zoomed in to see 200 or 300%. So I'll go one more time here to 300%. And then I will go up to my tool panel and choose the elliptical marquee tool. Now I'm going to put the pointer at approximately the center of the screw. I'm going to click and start dragging, and then without releasing the mouse button, I'm going to press Alt if you're using Windows, or Option if you're on a Mac, and continue dragging to the very edge of the screw. And if I started in the exact center, then my selection is going to be centered. It looks to me like I was a little off center on my start. So what I can do, whoops, is keep the Alt or Option key down and select my Move tool. Whoops, sorry, I didn't do that right. I could use one of those methods that we used earlier if we need to reposition it, or since I already lost all the ability to do that, I can just deselect and start over. So I'll go ahead and do that again. I'll go ahead and try to find the center of this screw, start dragging my selection, press the Alt or Option, and then drag out. And that's a little bit better than the first time. I think I want to so what I just did was press the space bar while continuing to hold the Alt or Option key down, and I kind of shifted the entire selection over. Now I'm a little bit happier with that. I'm going to let go of the, whoops, make sure you let go of your mouse first and then your Alt or Option, and then you have the selection. Now I can move this. I want to put it on the shadow box, but I want to duplicate it also for the other corners. So I'll go ahead and fit on screen. So I'll move the screw. It's kind of large, so we'll resize it. Then we'll duplicate it. My screw is still selected. I'll choose the Move tool, and I'll position the pointer inside the screw selection, and we see those little pair of scissors indicating that if I drag this, it's going to cut it from its current location and move it to the new location. So I'll drag this to the lower right. You can see that it's way too big, but I'll just set it down there. I'll go up to my menu and go Edit, Transform, Scale, which allows me to resize this. And then I'll just grab onto one of these corners of the bounding box and reduce this to about 40%. And you're like, how do I know when I've gotten to 40%? If you look back up in the Options menu, as I drag, the width, height, and everything is changing. The very first number, the width and height, When I get to about 40% on those, that's when I want to stop. So I'm just about there, 40.11. So I'll let go of that. And now my screw head is resized. I'll go ahead and enter or return to commit that change. That way it gets rid of the bounding box. Select the move tool again. Oops, I still have that. That didn't commit. The computer's been doing this a couple of times, so I'm going to change tools. There we go. And then go back to the move tool. For some reason, it's not committing that change. Go ahead and zoom in here so I can see what's happening. Okay, now I'm not sure why it looks like it wasn't committing my resize, but now it looks like it has. So I'll go ahead and reposition this, excuse me, where I want it, just in the corner here. And then leaving it selected, go ahead and save your work since you've done all that work to resize it. And now we're going to copy it. Hold on just one second. Sometimes all this talking gets to me. You can move and duplicate at the same time. I got to go back to Command 0 to fit this on the screen, and I hope you can see this, but I'll tell you what I'm doing at the same time. But with the move tool selected, you're going to hold down Alt on a Windows or Option on a Mac, and as you click onto, and you know what? It's doing it again. It's almost like it wants to, there we go. When I have it zoomed out, it wants to resize it again. But now you can see a black and a white arrow. And that's because I'm holding down Alt or Option with the move tool. What it's going to do, it's going to duplicate this screw. And so I just can click and start dragging. And since so I've got that duplicate, I can just drag it over here to the left side. And if you hold the Shift key down while you're moving it, it's going to constrain it horizontally or vertically so they'll be exactly lined up. I didn't do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do the same steps, and this time I'll show you that. With this screw selected, I'll hold down Alt or Option, and I'll also hold down the Shift key, and now it's going to constrain this whole thing. Oops, didn't mean to do that. There we go. So that it stays on the same vertical line as the screw that I just copied. And then I can let go of the, oops, I can let go of everything, and there's that screw there. I'd like to zoom in a little bit because I know this has got to be hard to see, you guys. And now one more time with the move tool, I'll hold Alt or Option and duplicate this screw. Oops, see that? Did it again. Isn't that funny? So I'm going to go Command Z to undo that. Zoom in, so it's almost like Photoshop doesn't know what I want.
You know, Vicki, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, I can.
I'm noticing the toolbar. Up at the toolbar, it has this tick box, Show Transform Controls. I wonder if that's why it keeps wanting to, yeah.
Ah. Huh.
I don't know. I just noticed that.
Thank you for noticing that. Well, let's see if it does it again. Let me zoom back out, because And then alter option. Oh, you're just a genius. Who is this?
This is Sarah, and I'm not a genius. It's very easy to be a backseat driver.
Well, that was it. Perfect. So if that's happening to you all out there in classroom land, make sure that show transform controls is not checked when you're trying to duplicate and move, or you're going to have to go through the gyrations that I just went through. All right, and so we've got the 4 screws positioned. You know, if you wanted to, you could rotate these so they weren't all exactly the same, so you can do that kind of thing. But I definitely want to save my work since we went through all that. And now that we're pretty much finished with this, we're going to crop it and get rid of all this stuff that we don't need anymore. So I'll choose the crop tool. And now I have a crop boundary. Now remember last week when I chose width times height times resolution to make a selection, it is still set on that. So I want to go back to the default, which is ratio. Otherwise, I'll have it set to that 7 by 7 inches that we did last week, and that's not what we want here. Now we can drag our corners in and match up this frame. Again, follow along with the book, so I'm doing it exactly the way you want. And I think they're leaving a little area of white around it. Okay, so we'll just go around and try to make it even, but I'm just eyeballing it really. I'll go ahead and commit the crop by selecting this check up at the top. Save my work. And we are finished with our selection lesson. And doesn't it look pretty? Our little memories from the beach. Let me stop recording and then we can talk about this. Any questions you might have. So I'll stop now.